Hey guys, Bart from TST Industries here. In this episode of TST Garage, I have a 2017 and up Yamaha FZ-09 in the shop, and I will be installing some signaling options on this particular bike that were developed to go in conjunction with our fender eliminator systems. These will likely fit on other fender eliminators by other brands, but the installation we're going to show you is actually on our systems for this bike. All right, so we have two main options for you. A pod signal kit that will work in conjunction with a rear mounted fender eliminator, and also we have our low profile pod signals that fit on a deep mounted fender eliminator system, and they feature a hinged bracket like this that will enable you to make your lights parallel with the ground. Now, to make this plug and play, we have an optional harness converter set. This basically couples with these bullet connectors that are pre-fitted on our signal lamps. Plugs in just like this and enables you to plug into your Yamaha harness. It's very simple, pretty self-explanatory, but we'll show you the steps in detail. So, as promised in our fender eliminator videos, we are bringing you this video to show you how to complete your whole setup. For a license plate light video, you will have to look at a separate video that we've made in the past, and it's pretty self-explanatory and universal, so that will help you out there. In this video, we will start with the pod signals on the rear setup, and then tear it down and go on to the adjustable low profile pods. Before we get on the bike, I like to do this step first. It makes the bike portion vastly more comfortable and less cumbersome. The step is the configuration of our signal brackets onto the actual signals. So I'm going to lay out the signals first, lay out the configuration of the brackets. As you can see, the slotted side goes this way, and we have a round hole that goes towards the signals. I'm going to stretch out the wires, remove the nuts from the signals, and configure them like this. Put the wires through, nut on flange first, have the stud protrude through that hole, and turn on the nut until it bottoms out. And I'm going to leave this configured in approximately this position. We will fine tune it on the bike. Repeat the procedure on the other side. And voila, this is ready to go on the bike. One thing I want to note before we jump on the bike is that we've provided all the hardware necessary for attaching this to the license plate mount with the license plate in place, so do not reuse any of the components that may be holding your license plate at the moment. Just use what we've provided you with. All right, let's now get on the bike. Step one, we'll remove the seat and also the license plate. In step two, we will be focusing on removing this entire tail fairing side off the bike. We'll start with the screw fasteners, one right forward of the tail light. This requires a 4mm Allen, and it's a black screw. There's another black screw just forward of that location. We're going to leave that one here. I'm going to take out the silver screw from the next location. It looks like this, and goes into a rubber grommet up top. And then, also with a 4mm Allen, we will remove the black screw from the bottom here, and another silver screw from this location. Next, we will remove these three push fasteners. Push in the tops, centers rather, and that resets an actual fastener like this. Get them back reset to this configuration, ready for reinsertion. Now this panel is free to come out. Dislodge it on the bottom and pull it off to the back. There is interference geometry between the inside here and a clip on the tail light, so that needs to come out towards the rear. In the next step, I will grab one of our pre-configured bracket and signal sets and feed the bullet connectors along with the wires through a little access hole in the undertail. As they penetrate to the subtray, we can find them here, just forward of our closeout piece. I'm just gonna rest it on top of our fender eliminator here so that I don't have to hold it. And now I'm gonna configure one of our harness converters onto these bullet connectors. We're gonna go black to red and yellow to brown, and the blue one remains disconnected. I'm just going to bend it back like this. Here you can see that we do have vinyl caps that cover the connections, and these are the electrical insulators, but they are kind of free to move around. So what I like to do is lock them in place with some electrical tape. And once I have this packaged up nice and neat and each conductor isolated, now I can feed the plug under this subframe tube up to the top and access the location I showed you guys in our previous videos where our signal connectors are. One's black, one is gray. I'm going to pick one. At this point it doesn't matter which one. These plugs are keyed. They only fit one way. So once you find the key, you can power up the bike and try one of the signals, and I've pressed left. This will be our left signal. I'm just going to repeat the same steps to attach the right side signal onto the bike. All right, so this step is done. We can move on to the next step, which will be to mount these in the back of the license plate mount along with our license plate. So now we will grab our license plate and some of the hardware that came with the kit. 16mm long M6 screw goes through one of the washers like this, through the license plate, into the license plate mount. And from the back side, we will get the slotted part of the bracket over that screw, another washer on that bolted connection, and cap it off with a nylock locking nut. Start the thread, leave it loose, and repeat on the other side. Okay, now grab a 4mm Allen and a 10mm box wrench or open-ended wrench and get these nuts seated more towards the bottom. I like to get them pretty snug, but still leave some adjustability in the system. Now at this point we can center our fasteners, center our license plate, and also center our signals. And once everything looks good to you, you can just go ahead and lock all these things down. Keep in mind that you probably want to get these pod stalks parallel with the ground. And now using a 14 millimeter open-ended wrench, I'm going to tighten down on the nuts that are holding these pod signals on. Before I do that, I'll make sure that these lenses are perpendicular to the ground. The nuts are actually threading onto studs that are overmolded with this rubber. The rubber is for the purpose of preserving your signal's integrity in case you hit something. It won't just damage it and tear it off, but at the same time, you are turning a mechanical fastener onto a part that's been overmolded and can let go if over tightened. So use care here. You only want to tighten it enough to give it enough friction to stop it from moving. Repeat the steps on the other side. And that's that. Now at this point, I'm gonna just reel in the wires, make sure that most of my wiring is inside the tail. And as an option, if you want to make these super neat, you can use some wire ties or some other device of that sort to get the wires from behind here attached to your bracket. Now let's pull these tight and then just get them in under here between the undertail and the sub tray. Make sure they're nice and neat everywhere. And we can just put this sheathing that collects all the wires, and it's basically just a wire management setup here. It doesn't really provide much in the form of insulation from water or anything. Just get that back on the way it was in the factory setup. Tuck the wires away, and we can replace all the components we've taken off in the reverse order of disassembly. Test the system, left, right. As you can see here, we are hyper flashing. The flash rate is a little bit faster than the 85 cycles per minute that the factory sets the flash rate at. This is because we've gone from incandescent lamps for the signals to LED type lamps, and they draw much less current and cause your signal relay to flash fast. To combat this, you can install one of our TST Industries Gen 2 flasher relays. It's a 2-minute install. Pop the seat off. It's all under there. We actually have a separate video showing you guys how to do this step by step, so I hope you check out that video. All right, this was pretty simple. What I'd like to do now is jump into the next segment where we'll show you the installation of the signals that we have specifically made for this area. So I'll tear this down and we'll see you in a minute. All right, so now we're up to the point in the video where we will show you how to pre-configure and install the other type of the signaling system we provide. This system is meant for installation with the lower mount fender eliminator, and we will need to pre-configure these setups 2 of these setups from the parts provided in the kit. It's up to you to choose whether you want to go with clear or smoked lens. For this particular install, we will be working with clear. I will pre-configure one side setup. The other side is exactly the same. It just gets flipped around and installed on the other side. So I will just do one, and we already have one pre-configured. So the first step will be to configure this setup out of the brackets and hardware that we've provided in the kit. This will need 2 of these L brackets, 2 washers, a plastic shoulder spacer, a 16mm M6 screw, and a nylock locking nut. We'll place the brackets like this, opposing each other with the surfaces having round holes contacting each other, and we will use this shoulder spacer as a hinge that will protrude through both of these components, and it will receive a washer, a screw through the assembly, a washer on the other side, and then the nut. When this hardware is screwed together tightly, it causes the spacer to expand and locks it in whichever position you leave it in. So I'm going to use a 10mm box wrench on the nut and a 4mm Allen in the screw, and I will get these bottomed out and tightened up just a little bit, preserving some adjustability, but we don't want it to be sloppy and moving around too much. Next, we will grab one of the washers and one of the plastic nuts that came with this setup, and we'll proceed to configure this signal onto our brackets. Now, sort of arbitrary which way the nut and the head of the screw goes, but I like to configure it so that the inside of the bike receives the screw and the nut goes towards the outside, because it's vastly easier to work with our tools on this setup in this configuration. So we'll place the signal on the nut side, and using the washer and the nut, we'll get it fastened in place. Before I move on from this step, I will make sure that this cable housing goes inside of my signal. This will prevent moisture from going into the signal. And now we could configure our plug and play connection setup, the harness converter, onto this signal setup. We'll use yellow wire into the brown wire on the converter, black wire from the signal into the red wire, and the blue lead remains not connected, so I just fold it over and get it in this configuration. Like you saw in the first segment, we have these insulating caps over the connections. They do move around, so we do want to lock them down with electrical tape. All right, now that I have this nice and neat, tightly wrapped in, all the connectors are isolated, we can jump onto the bike and start the actual procedure of installation. If your license plate bracket is present on the bike, you will need to remove it. Using a 3mm Allen, remove the hardware and retain all of it for reinstallation. And next, I'm going to remove all of the push fasteners from under here. There are 3 up each side, and then also one additional one in here. Going to first try without removing this one. I think the little center shroud will get retained in place. Yeah, so we'll leave this one intact. Next, we will use a 4mm Allen to remove this screw, a black screw by the taillight, and a silver screw over here a little bit forward of that. And then the silver screw down here. Now this whole component will be free to push back and remove off the bike. We will repeat those steps on the other side. Now we can grab our pre-configured signal modules. I'm going to use one through here, right about midway on this little portion of the center shroud. I'm going to go up to the top through the sub tray and just lay it over just like that through the top. We can now bring this component back here, put it roughly back in place, making sure the interference geometry lock here engages with a little clip on the taillight. And now we want to make sure that our wire comes out from the right place here. So we have our wire at the corner of the battery box and it's still decently loose. We'll be able to maneuver it around a little bit. And for the purpose of keeping this all in place, I'm going to put some of these push fasteners back, along with the one silver screw that I took out of here. All right. Now when I jump up top, I have my wiring disconnected from the removal of the OEM signaling setup. There's a black and a gray plug. I'm going to power on the bike, and since we're working on the left side here, I'm going to power up the left signal and find which one of those corresponds to that signal. Left side is gray. We have our signal connected. I'm just going to get it tucked away for the moment, power down the bike, and work on the other side. Now this side's a little bit easier, less stuff in the way, and we don't have to go all the way through the subframe and over. So I'm just gonna find a good spot to snake this up between this subframe component and the sub tray. You do want it to end up on top. We could just go up straight up here and slide down, and then lay our wire in here, have it protrude from that approximately same location here in the corner, and get this fairing component locked on the back here with the interference geometry. Get it placed, make sure that our wire is not interfering with the fit of these components. And like before, using these push fasteners, we're going to make the system stay in place. I'm going to quickly test it so I don't go too far forward. All right, both sides are working, so we can move on. All right, so after we put in this screw here, we can move on to the installation of the license plate bracket. We'll use the same hardware as before. Screw with washer from the outside, little spacer, and then we will have the wire in this location as we screw this in. I'm going to maintain some adjustability here and fully bottom it out. Move on to the other side. Basically do the same thing. Make sure that the wire is over one of those bracket components. Basically place it in the middle here. Now center the bracket and fully tighten it. Now we could actually mount these back here along with the license plate in place. So now I'm going to align my slotted bracket for the signals on the back of our license plate bracket here, and my license plate will go up front, and then using the following hardware I will make the installation. I have 16mm long M6 screws going through a washer, through the license plate, through this whole setup, the washer on the back, and the lock nut capping that off. I will engage the threads and repeat the procedure on the other side before I do any tightening. Now using 10mm box wrench from the back, I'm going to hold that nut and use a 4mm Allen from the outside. Get that connection snug. And then make sure that my license plate is hanging center. And the bracket that attaches this system to the license plate bracket is hanging level. And I'm going to take that connection to full tightness. Repeat the procedure on the other side. Now we can actually set how these hang. So I'm going to pick an angle that is perpendicular to the ground, and then I'm going to tighten up the connections on this axis. Now using my 17mm open-ended wrench, I'm going to take the back side fastener, the nut and washer of this lamp to full tightness. Remember, you are tightening plastic nut onto a plastic stud. You don't want to over tighten that. You just want to give it enough friction so it doesn't move around. Let's repeat these steps on the opposite side. All right. So now I just have to make sure that I don't have too much slack in this wire here. Move all these wires into appropriate places up top. Redo all the bolt connections up top. Replace the seat, and we'll be ready to go. So we have this one set of wires coming from this opening in the sub tray here, and the other one from in between the sub tray and our subframe. So we're just going to do our best to get them nice and neat here. What I like to do on this bike is pull up on these two relays and run this set of wires underneath. That gets them out of the way and makes for a really nice looking installation. When laid into here, pretty much disappears and looks like the OEM setup. Now on this side, We'll just get this set of wires in under this bracket, lay it down in there, the same fashion as the other one. Velcro it up, wrap it around, other set of Velcro, nice and tight, and there you go. This is that simple. Your OEM relay sits here. I mentioned before about the LED flasher relay. You place it here. Basically takes a couple extra seconds. It's a really nice accessory and will stabilize your flash rate to the 85 cycles per minute. This is a separate component, but we typically do these installations together, so I'm going to demonstrate the installation here. We do have a separate video that guides you in this installation and also shows you how to adjust the flash rate to your liking should you choose to change the flash rate. Boom, there it is. All right, so let's replace some fasteners, replace the seat, and go for a ride. All right, let's give it another test. Left, right. All right, nice and bright, sleek, low profile. Looks really, really nice here. But if you prefer the rear setup, we got you back as well. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Consider checking out the website for these parts and other parts for this bike. We have a ton of parts already made, more parts coming out soon. We are actually working on an integrated taillight for this bike that should be available early 2018. If you're watching this in 2018, chances are we already have it on the market. So come check it out at tstindustries.com. I'm done here. Nice hanging out with you guys. See you next time.